people who've written grants, I think we know this. You really, really, really have to understand the story that you're telling. That the information you're going to share, the data that you're going to use in the grant. A good grant is a really good story that is supported by a lot of evidence, with a theme that the reader, the grant reviewers, when they get done, they recognize that there was a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there was a logic thread, and a good argument, that just was well formulated and well organized and articulated in a way that seemed compelling. It wasn't dry. It wasn't just, regurgitating a lot of the same data that people are aware of. That there was a little bit of imagination brought into the grant writing process.
Right. It brings me to I just have this memory, Russ, of you and I working together on one. I'm not going to name any schools, but the school in particular wanted to have an advanced manufacturing program, and I met with them, and I was scratching my head at the time, so I called you in, and you pivoted them to a different program. Could you kind of explain what your reasoning was for that?
A couple of things. One is I knew from the data at the time that we were meeting with these folks at this school that there was that the particularly the labor market data, this was not a slam dunk. There are some regions where the program that you're trying to support, it's very clear that the empirical data, the labor market data, is calling for what you want to do, that you are responding to a very real and pressing need in your community. That was not the case per se with this one particular school. The flip side of that was this was a school in a region that was sorely deficient in a couple of other areas. And so literally in the course of two conversations, the school went from, wanting program A to program B. And not only did we succeed in securing the funding for that program, but 2 years later, it turns out it's one of the most popular programs in the school. So, the lesson learned there, I guess, is don't get your heart set on a particular program per se. As you go into this process, be curious, and be prepared to rethink some of your core assumptions.
Yeah, it's like the analogy I use when I talk to some schools, and I say it'd be great, these schools want to have a shipbuilding program in the Berkshires, or a boat repair program, and this is not going to fly because there's no jobs out there. But if you have that same program on Cape Cod, and it's a slam dunk, it's a good opportunity.
Yeah.
So just knowing your reason. So Russell, you said something about the workforce. There is some data out there for these people to have, right? Where can they find that?
Well, the labor market data is very available, both from the federal government as well as the state government. I'm sure most of the folks on the call today are familiar with the sources. The Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development. You get what they call the NAICS codes, which are the industry codes. You get the SOC codes, which are the occupational codes. So that if you're doing a workforce development grant, an education and workforce development grant, you want to be sure that you are well familiar with that data. You know where it is, you know how to get it, you know how to interpret it, you can analyze it. Um, and you understand that it's not 100% of your business case, but to the extent to which these grants are in some ways a business brief, you're writing a business case. Who are your customers? What is their problem? How is this program that you're proposing and the funding you're requesting, how does that in a very meaningful way address that problem? And uh, and so yes, I would encourage people to do that. The other thing is is there are lots of other resources out there, secondary as well as primary sources of not just the labor market data, but as I look across a number of industries, whether it's healthcare or construction, manufacturing, um, even hospitality now,
Right.
we're at a very, very important inflection point in the history, broadly speaking, of the American, if not the global economy. And there are lots of people out there writing very interesting um, research studies. I found a very interesting, I'll share one specifically. I found a really interesting research study um, that just came out of MIT. MIT, needless to say, there's all kinds of channels for research, but there's a group there called the Task Force on the Future of Work. Well, they've written some really interesting briefs and research papers, and it kind of gets back to this idea that you're telling a story in the grant. And I think the tendency sometimes, particularly for people who've done a lot of this, or you have 19 other roles that you're playing in your school, your organization, you don't have a lot of time to do research. There is that tendency to kind of just go to the typical wells that you're used to going to, that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with. There's something to be said for that. But the other thing I think that's really important about good grant writing is you as the grant writer or your grant writing team, you want to be curious. You want to be asking probing questions. You don't want to just, as I would say, round up the usual suspects. So give yourself time, and in your preparation, do some reading outside of your normal, what I would say your normal pattern or your normal, behavior in terms of doing some research. Oftentimes, when you read, for instance, there is so much out there now about the future of the healthcare industry. I for one, for instance, am a big fan of McKinsey. They have a lot of free material out there. Their insight reports I find extremely informative and provocative and evocative. The McKinsey consulting briefs, they're always looking ahead, and they're presenting you sometimes with kind of counterintuitive ways of viewing the world. And they've been doing a lot of really good kind of not just data analysis, but analytics on the future of healthcare. Well, I would say if you're writing one of these grants, give yourself a few hours to be a little curious, read some things, look out there on the future of the healthcare industry or the future of manufacturing. Where are we going in terms of IT and cybersecurity? Again, I keep coming back to this idea that we are at a really remarkable period of time when, not just because of COVID, but because of other broader economic trends, the workplace, we all know this, the workplace over the next decade, there isn't a workplace out there that is not going to be fundamentally impact, if not transformed, at some level due to new technology, new work practices, whatever. And if you're writing a grant about how you're going to help people develop skills and knowledge that is essential for them to be successful in the workplace, um, I'm not saying we throw out the old playbook,
Mm-hmm.
but in a lot of industries, the old playbook is becoming very obsolete and arcane.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, in your grant, and you're not writing a master's thesis here or anything of the sort, but you're doing your industry review and your data analysis, and you include one paragraph or two paragraphs where you cite a couple of sources that in all likelihood the grant review committee hasn't seen before. And I think that makes the grant a lot
Sure.
more interesting, a lot more valid.
Mm-hmm.
It shows the grant review committee that you're actually thinking about this,
Did your research.
that
Yeah.
you're doing your research,
Right.
and that you're prepared to be a little creative and a little imaginative. And I have a feeling that we're entering a period of time now where, um, you know, that kind of a little bit more imaginative thinking driven by your own curiosity is going to be rewarded.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And so there's people on this call from all throughout New England, and actually I think my buddy Louisiana Lee is on there from Louisiana. But in Massachusetts we have the state broken down into 6 different regional
Yeah,
blueprints. So
yeah.
so if you the first part of this conversation we're having with Russ is, first of all, figuring out what you want to write the grant about. What is it you're going after, and making sure you have a solid foundation for that. And we're going to put in the chat box um, a link to the regional blueprints in Massachusetts. If you don't know where they are, um, this is where you'll find the data that says, okay, if you're in Central Mass, you might want to be thinking about advanced manufacturing, or if you're in Boston, you might want to think about IT or healthcare, right?
Mhm.
So we just put the link in there, and actually Kristen put the link in for the study that Russ just mentioned as well, the McKinsey report. So you can take a look at those, go into the chat box and get those links, right? So to me, it seems like step one is certainly figuring out what you want to write this grant for. What is it for? And sometimes you might want to write it for something, but you have to be open-minded enough to realize it might not work. Um, the other steps. There's more to it. I call them hooks and anchors, Russ, where there's pieces of these grants that are very, very important in being able to secure the funds. And let's just talk about the first one is having some partnerships with the local industries that will support this grant.
That is absolutely essential. That's critical. And that shows up in the grant in a variety of ways. Um, First, of course, being the letters of support that you need. That's a task that most grant writers are familiar with. Um, and to go further on that a little bit, I would say yes, your regional blueprints are a great place to start in terms of identifying partners. The other thing I would say is that, again, let's just say you're at a technical high school and you have your program advisory committees, your PACs.
Hmm.
You have partnerships with businesses in your community.
Right.
Those businesses are helping you understand what their current and, very importantly, what their future needs are going to be.
Hmm.
I would say, in addition to that, I kind of come back to the same point I made earlier. Don't just round up the usual suspects. Give yourself the time and the opportunity to go out and meet some new neighbors. Because you're going to find businesses in your region that are relatively new, that maybe they don't have a strong relationship with your programs currently, but I would be very aggressive in seeking both to reinforce your current partnerships and make sure that those partners are supporting the grant for you, and then take this opportunity as an opportunity to develop um, greater resiliency within your own workforce development system. Recall that at the end of the day, particularly in Massachusetts, the people who write workforce development RFPs, and they've been doing this for 40 years, they understand that in Massachusetts, the expectation is that workforce development is the flip side to the economic development coin. People clearly are looking for, and they have to justify these appropriations on the basis of the extent to which this funding and workforce development supports business growth and economic development.
Right.
That is at the core of what these grants are about. And these folks take this very, very seriously. So you have to, appreciate where they're coming from. The other thing is, and I would say this was a significant change, probably dating back now 20 years anyway in Massachusetts. The expectation is that the school is a part of a network. You're a part of a system. And what the funders care most about, they care about the schools, they care about the outcomes for the grants, but the people at the 30,000-foot level, at the senior executive level in the Executive Office of Labor, or at ComCorp, the Commonwealth Corporation, or the Department of Education, their perspective is, how is this adding strength and resiliency to the workforce development system? So if you follow that logic, then you want to be sure that you know the people who are the players in your region. If you're somewhat new to this, make sure you know the director of your Mass Hire Career Center. Make sure that you've reached out to some of the people who authored those regional workforce planning blueprints.
Right.
Just give yourself the time to make sure that these folks know that you're preparing this grant, and then in all likelihood, they're going to want to help you.
Great. Yep. Absolutely. And businesses they've got a reason for it, right? They need they need to hire people.
Right.
David Kemsky just actually added into the chat the blueprint for the state of Connecticut. So if you're from Connecticut, you can go in there and you can grab that out. So my hooks and my anchors are usually, an anchor is the partnership with the business. I had a school that was able to partner with a very large company down in the South Shore, and once they had that letter from that company, I told them that was an anchor. You're going to win this grant, and they were going to go for, I think, 250,000, and you could go up to 500. And I said, you're shortchanging yourself because of this anchor that you have. You have such a strong connection with this company. You'll get the money. So why not go for the 500,000? And they did, and they won it. So that you anchor that grant with a good partnership with the local industry. That when those students get trained, they can get jobs. And speaking of which, right? So the next one is what I call hooks, right? So one of the hooks would be making sure that there's some kind of credentialing going along with the program that you're building, right? So you don't just want to put together a program that has no credentialing. So as a consultant, or as a strategist, what I tend to do, Russ, is I tend to try to find as much equipment that will fit into that program that actually the manufacturer has certifications for. So what do you think of that?
Well, first of all, in terms of the success of a grant, just at a very practical, pragmatic level, if you cannot clearly articulate outcomes, and in particular, the certifications that accompany the training that you're going to be doing, this is especially true, I would say, for those post-secondary programs, those workforce development, the adult ed programs. So, you want to bring in some new welding equipment, and you're going to offer evening welding programs for people who are unemployed or underemployed. Yeah, you really need to be offering those American Welding Society
Right.
certifications, because
I-
um, they are the clearly what the employers are looking for. So again, it kind of comes back to that question of making sure that the businesses in your community, in your region, who are supporting you when that person comes in the door and is hired and is working, that person is truly prepared to take at least an entry level position. And
Right.
those certifications are the kind of the sine qua non of all of this.
Yep, 100%. I think it's the employer wants to know when this kid when the student when this employee comes through the door, they have a base level of skills, and those credentials will be the proof of the pudding. And
Right.
if you want to have a successful grant, you need to be able to provide the certifications. So today, I always talk to schools and say, students don't just graduate with diploma anymore. They graduate with a portfolio of credentials that they have earned through the school for their schooling. Um, so the next thing that always is a hurdle, Russ, is when if you look at some of the requirements for the grant, is that there's something called matching funds.
Yes.
um, and I think a lot of schools get scared when they see that. So I can give you my 2 cents, but what do you talk to schools about when it comes to the matching funds?
Well, clearly that's important. And if for no other reason than the funder wants to know that you're serious about what you're doing, and
Hmm.
that you're not, it's like an investor in a business who says, oh, wait a minute, my money is going to be the money that pays all your payroll. It pays the electric bill. It pays the air conditioning bill. It's not just, you're not going to use this to, develop a new product. You're going to run your business with it. Um, Funders in workforce development, I think, take somewhat the same perspective, which is um, the the grantee needs to demonstrate that they have skin in the game, that there's a
Right,
commitment. Now, there's a variety of ways that you can do that. Some of
right,
it is just straight out a dollar match. Some of it is in kind. Everyone is familiar with that in kind, but you need to be clear about that.
right.
And for instance, if you're building out a new program or you're upgrading your shop, be sure that the shop is ready for the new equipment. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you need to do anything from adding new ventilation because you're bringing in new welding equipment, or you need to add new and better lighting because you've just brought in new machine tools, and your machine technology shop, still has light fixtures circa 1978.
Right.
You need to add electrical service, whatever it
Sure.
might be. You can build that into your grant as your commitment to making sure that you're not just relying on the state 100% to support your program. And the other piece of that too is you can bring in this is a great opportunity for some of your partners to demonstrate their commitment to what
Hmm.
you're doing.
Right.
So maybe they're going to offer some new equipment, or they're going to offer some professional development for your faculty, because maybe the faculty isn't entirely familiar with some of this new technology. Well, that professional development has value, and
Right.
you can monetize that as a part of your matching funds. So you can be somewhat creative, but again, I think you want to be demonstrating to the funding sources
Hmm.
that you are not 100% reliant on them to pull this off, that
Right.
you are prepared to, inject some of your own social capital, as well as maybe even, dollars out of your own budget.
Sure, sure. And that's where I come in often with some of these grants is strategizing a way to get those funds. And it could be something as simple as a software donation from a company. I
Hmm.
was fortunate enough to help a school, get a $250,000 software donation. That goes as a matching fund. So when you get those and you put those on your grant, it's really gonna start to rise that grant up to the top. Um, the other thing that I try to coach is making sure that the program has reach. When I say reach, Russell, you know what I mean, right? That
Hmm.
touch as many students as possible.
Yes. So again, people, particularly in technical vocational education, we appreciate this, that increasingly, and in particular here in Massachusetts, but I'm sure it's true elsewhere, people are looking at the growing numbers of people across our society and economy who are unemployed, who are underemployed, people who historically have been denied access to certain trades or certain professions or career paths. Um, you know you want to be sure that, or to make to at a minimum to have your grant successful. So you're bringing in a new program for your day school. One, that's great. Your K through 12 students presumably are benefiting that. But what about the after school program
Right.
for um, that young adult population in the community that
Sure.
didn't have a chance to get technical education, and but they're floundering. They don't really have a lot of career direction. There's a lot of emphasis. There's a lot of recognition now that at a time when the economy up pre-COVID was really experiencing significant skill shortages across a wide range of industries and occupations. At the same time, there are hundreds of thousands of people in Massachusetts or millions across the United States who are not doing what they want to be doing, who don't feel that they're being productive.
Mm-hmm.
The funding sources need to respond to that,
Mm-hmm.
both out of a sense of social responsibility, but also the pragmatics of it. There are a lot of people who are in the most practical sense really underemployed. Public policy now is focusing a lot on that population. So you need to build that into your grant. Your program needs to be serve multiple constituencies to the extent to which you're capable
Right.
of doing that. Now, if you stretch to the point where your organization can't deliver, then that's a problem. So I think that's a big part of what people appreciate in terms of the return on investment for a particular grant.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I would say that's the people that you're serving, to the extent to which you can serve a lot more constituencies,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly people at risk or people who might not necessarily be able to enter the labor market and the labor force and be successful right out of the chute. That is a really good thing.
Right.
It's a good thing in and of itself, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it also helps your grant.
Yeah. So a lot of times it could be as simple, Russ, as starting a summer program that they didn't have already, and maybe some schools could, the
Yep.
it's downtime there. Um, the more touches that you get with that equipment, the higher your score is going to be on your grant application.
Right. As long as you demonstrate the capacity to actually deliver, on
Yep,
that
yep,
promise.
yep, yep.
Um,
Um,
yep.
so along with all that, I this is, I guess, this is a plug for me. I guess one of the things that I always say is if you can partner with a trusted resource that's done it before, and it has done it. It will do it again and again and again. I think it's very important to be able to utilize resources that are out there for you, and to be able to lean on them. My company, we've built, hundreds of labs for schools, and we've done this over and over again. And if you reach out, you can, tap into the resources that are there for you, right? So also doing things like that is very important when it comes to the grant. Some other things that I think about, Russ, that you probably don't, is after the grant has been awarded, what do you do? How do you handle the grant at that point? And
Mhm.
I find a lot of schools, that's where they start stumbling towards the finish line, is because they don't understand their own school's buying process, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
when it comes to writing these grants now, you could be shooting for $500,000, and for some of these schools, $500,000 is something they've never seen before. And then when it comes to the buying process, you know the business office is just, overwhelmed. So to me, when I coach, what I do is I try to bring the business office in at the application process, so they understand what's going on, so they know what's going to happen down the line, and they understand how to buy. There's a lot of ways schools, um, there's a lot of ways schools purchase equipment depending on how much it
Mhm.
is, right? So you all know
Right.
that it's on the line, right? So if
Right.
you want to buy $100,000 3D printer, you can't just put in a PO for $100,000 3D printer, because it's going to get kicked back, and they say, okay, we need, three quotes, or we need, put it out to bid, or we need, a state bid list or something like that. So if
Mhm.
you, as a grant writer, understands the process of buying before you actually apply, you're going to save yourself a headache down the end of the line.
Yeah. Well, that gets back to a point I think we've been making throughout the webinar here, which is the process of writing a grant is really a process of engagement within your organization. It's a way of taking some time to ask some probing questions within your own organization. It's a chance to go out and it's a process of discovery within your own organization, but within your community. So the way I think about it is that, yeah, I mean, you as the grant writer should not be sitting in your office, you know, and you're writing the grant and it's 7 o'clock at night and you've been at the school or you've been in your organization all day doing your job, and now it's 7 o'clock at night. And, that morning you came to work and you said, before I leave the office today, I'm going to have section one of the grant drafted, right? You set that goal for yourself. Well, if you haven't taken some time during the day, to your point, Mark, to engage with the people in the business office, talk with the instructors and the teachers who are going to be directly impacted by this investment. Make sure that the people in your organization who need to own the outcomes and who need to be responsible and accountable, whether it's the finance and purchasing people, the instructors in
Hmm.
the shop, um, you the grant writing process, there may be one or two people at the end of the day who own the task of preparing the grant, actually writing it. And what I would say to those people is, first and foremost, give yourself enough time. Don't procrastinate.
Right. Right.
If there's a deadline, these grants, people who have done this a lot know grants are hard work. They're very time consuming, they're very labor intensive. If you're then going to go out and find new partners, you're going to talk with the people in your community college, you're going to do that kind of work, and you're going to talk with the stakeholders inside your own school or organization. That's also a good opportunity for people to say, hey, I've been thinking about this, and it would be really terrific if we could do X, Y, or Z. And you're like, oh, I didn't think of that before, right?
Right. Yep.
So to me, the upfront, the beginning, the phase one of preparing a grant is a process of discovery. You're looking to the external environment to the business community, to other educational partners, to people in the workforce development system. But you're also looking at your internal, the cliche in business is you're looking at your internal customers. Well, you have internal customers, and the last thing you want is that business manager who has to come up with some POs with 10 days left in the fiscal year. And then all of a sudden that business manager, pardon my French, is just really pissed at you and is like, the next time you want to write one of these grants, make sure you're writing it for another school because I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, right. So that's a good point.
I think there's the pragmatics of it, but I also think that as you engage with the vocational technical staff, you're talking with people maybe on your school board, that kind of thing. You're going to learn something that you're going to put in the grant that could in fact make a big difference.
Right. So we got to run a little. We only have a little time left, Russ.
Yep.
And if anyone wants to open up and actually ask Russ a question, here's your opportunity. He's a wealth of knowledge. I will say that until I get a question, I'm going to just do a little talking. That Russell is he's my go-to guy. He does do work for hire, and he is. What I tell the schools is Russell is a la carte, right? So there's nothing that AET Labs takes nothing from this. It's all a contract between the school and Russell. But Russell is a great resource. And when I say a la carte, what I mean is he's written entire grants from scratch for me for some of the schools, and he's also offered to just proofread them. So it's always a great idea to have a second set of eyes look at your grant. And we did get a question that comes in. So if we were awarded a grant last year, does that mean we won't get one this year? That's a great question, Marianne. And this is what I really encourage schools to do. And this is just my experience. It isn't a fact from any granting body. But what I've found is that once the school is funded, they continue to fund those programs. They like to make sure those programs are successful. And I have a number of schools, and Russell has a number of schools that we've worked with over the years that have won multiple grants, some for the same program, but some for a different program altogether. So right. Yeah, that's a great question.
You're not, by no means are you precluded. It's not a zero-sum game here. And there isn't some master umpire or scorekeeper keeping track of all of this. What I would say is, irrespective of the fact that you might have been funded in 2020 or 2019, whatever it might have been, if you have a really compelling need and a wonderful idea, and you have partners who are really serious about working with you, be they educational partners, employer partners, I would absolutely continue to write these grants.
Right.
And again, I think part of it is, yes, the dollars are the end product. When you don't get funded, sometimes you go, well, that was a waste of time. But if you've had a conversation with people that you wouldn't have talked with before about what you've met, some new employers, you've thought about an industry that was kind of off your radar screen for a long time. Okay, so you do it again in the next round, right. And you spend a little bit more time in the interim, buttressing your grant or filling in the gaps of your own organizational knowledge about X, Y, or Z industry. I don't see grant writing as the only justification for the investment of time and energy is, you got the money. Obviously, that is the preeminent purpose. But a good grant that generates strong conversations and builds relationships both within your organization and between your organization and the workforce development system, that is not a waste of time. And that will come back to serve you well in the future. You're building social capital in the community, and you can cash that check a year from now or 2 years
Mhm.
from now. But as long as you're building social capital, real social capital in the form of stronger relationships, a more resilient, way of engaging with your partners,
Right.
that to me is wonderful. And you get some new employers on your program advisory committee, and you find a new educational partner who says, well, you didn't get that grant, but we're applying for another grant over here from the National Science Foundation or something,
Hmm.
and we'd like to have you
Hmm.
as a partner on our grant.
Right.
Well, there you go.
Yep. So, yeah, and there's one other thing that I'm going to bring up, and I always say this. I always say, go big or go home, right? And for an instance, I had one school that called me, and they were afraid to ask for a lot of money, so they were going to go for 125,000 on a 200 or a $500,000 grant. I convinced them to go for at least double what they were asking, and they were scared, and they actually went and applied for 250, and they got 250. So don't be afraid to ask for a lot of money. That's the other piece of advice I have to say. So we're running out of time. There's a link in the chat if you'd like to fill out the survey for this. I really appreciate it. And Russell, thank you so much for being here with us. You're a great resource. If anyone wants to
Thank
get a
you.
hold of Russell, you can contact my office, and we can put you in contact with Russell. If you want to have a one-on-one with Russell, we can set that up for you.
Yep,
He's done
absolutely.
it for plenty of my schools. He's invaluable. And again, I always say, just not recreate the wheel, right? So this Russell has been through this thing so many times, and I think for me at least, the schools that I've recommended Russell to work with, I think he's batting 1,000. I think he's gotten the money for every single school that I've ever asked him to work for me for. So I appreciate
Right.
your help, Russell.
Well, thank you, Mark, and
Right.
good luck to everyone out there. Good luck with your grant writing. And again, think of it as a great learning process for yourself and your organization. And the rewards for the time spent will absolutely be there in the near term, or maybe a little bit further down the road.
All right. Good luck, guys and gals.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being here.